Oswego Speedway has come to be known for many things over its 63 years. It has long been known as a hotbed for open-wheel short-track racing. It's been known for its daunting and unforgiving steel walls that have outlined the careers of several open cockpit veterans. It's been known for its serene sunsets and beautiful view of Lake Ontario. And of course known for that masterfully prepared Hoffman hot dog that's aroma fills the same wood and steel grandstands that have stood for so many years. Its history and legacy are rich, with memories of fans new and old. Nolan Swift rebounding to win the Classic from 2 laps down. Jim Shampine leading all 200 Classic laps. Bentley Warren collecting his unprecedented 6th international win, and the cries of Eddie B in '83 still fill this hallowed ground and always will. And since 1961, one common thread, nearly as thick as the Speedway itself, has held it all together: the Supermodified. Above all else, the Speedway may be most known for this hybrid of open-wheel racing, this 800 horsepower, 1,800-pound beast that runs no place else in the world on a weekly basis. Indeed, Oswego Speedway is the home of Supermodifieds. After running A and B class modifieds through the 1950s, it was in 1961 that the first Supermodified, or Eagle class car as they were known in the Midwest, came to the Speedway for the International Classic. The Caruso family opened the rules wide open for that international event, one of the highest paying short track races anywhere in the country. And the event was dominated by the Midwest Invaders and their Supermodified creations. Michigan pilots Gordon Johncock and Art Bennett would sit on the front row in their upright, tubular, and channeled racing machines, with Bennett going on to claim victory. The very next season, the Speedway would officially become the home of Supermodifieds, allowing the Supers to compete on a weekly basis. Bennett would go on to win Oswego's track title in '62, with another Midwest shoe, Dave Paul, winning the '62 Classic, besting a whopping field of 72 cars, which saw 52 start the Consi. Through the early to mid-1960s, the Oswego Supermodified took the basic upright form found with race winners of the day: Bennett, Johncock, Paul, Ronnie Lux, and of course Nolan Swift, who retrofit his controversial and dominant tubular modified into a Supermodified. Swift would be the main local contender to the Midwest Invaders, winning the '63 and '67 International Classics, as well as the '64 and '66 track championships in this very car. However, by the late 1960s at Oswego, the Supermodified would undergo its first evolutionary change, taking a page from the Indianapolis Motor Speedway. While the upright form of Supermodified with the driveline below the driver proved to be dominant, racers such as Richwood, Ohio's Todd Gibson took note of the Indy Roadster, with its low center of gravity and offset driveline, which allowed the driver to sit lower in the race car, and decided this was the new direction of Supermodified racing. Gibson purchased a wrecked Koonsman Indy Roadster in 1966, offset the driveline 8 inches, shortened the wheelbase, and brought it to Oswego in 1967. In only his second start, Gibson would win with the Flintstone Flyer Zero, and in 1968 he proceeded to lay down one of the most dominant seasons in Speedway history, winning the track title with a total of 13 feature wins, including an unheard of 9 in a row. The Roadster was now king of Oswego. For the better part of a decade following, the Roadster version of the Supermodified at Oswego Speedway evolved locally, taking several twists and turns with different variations built by different talented car owners. Along that journey, Jim Shampine's wedge design, which took several twists and turns of its own, proved to be most successful. Shampine's wedge amassed a total of 55 feature wins at Oswego from '69 to '77, including 5 track championships and 2 International Classic wins. During this, Champagne's most dominant span, nearly everything was attempted to bring him down. Rear-engine versions of the Supermodified, including a masterminded four-wheel drive effort driven by Fred Graves during the 1970s, were all attempted. Johnny Spencer, driving the Doug Duncan-owned rear-engine number 07, would actually become the first driver to wheel a rear-engine machine to victory in 1970. While the rear-engine Roadster seemed to hold the key to speed at Oswego, as it did at Indianapolis, reliability was its downfall. With that said, Champagne went back to the drawing board in 1976 when it became apparent that the rest of the field was catching up to his current front-engine Roadster, and he went on to create the blueprint for all Supermodifieds we know today, the Radical Offset. The car, which to the naked eye seemed very much similar to every other front-engine machine on the circuit, was in fact radically different. The driveline of the race car was pushed nearly 10 inches further to the left than any other Supermodified ever built. In fact, it was so radically offset that the driveline itself was mounted outside of the left side frame rail. Champagne tested and tuned the car for all of 1976, never entering the car in an official race. Champagne would debut the car in July of 1977, promptly putting the race car in victory lane the first 2 nights he drove it. And in 1978, Champagne simply dominated, winning 11 features in a row. The Offset was now king of Oswego. Unlike the era of the Upright and the Roadsters, which saw nearly a decade of competition before another needed evolution came into the sport in order to be competitive, just 2 years after building the Radical Offset, Champagne rolled his own version of the rear-engine Super off the table, the Green Machine. Again, taking time to prep the car, Champagne himself hardly raced the rear-engine creation. In fact, the engineering whiz only won one main event in the car, which as it turned out, could only compete during the 1979 season. For the 79 Classic, Champagne opted to run his still dominant Radical Offset machine and tapped Warren Coniam to drive the rear engine. Each ran 1-2 early on, but Champagne would hit a spinning lap car on lap 73 to knock himself out of the event, and Coniam would lose a lap in the pit area. However, when Coniam returned to the racing surface, he fully unleashed the speed of the Green Machine, passing 2 and 3 cars at a time, unlapping himself and taking the race lead, only to be black flagged with 15 laps to go due to an oil leak. During the off-season leading up to the 1980 campaign, rule mandates would come down eliminating rear-engine Supermodified designs at Oswego, essentially tabbing the 18-inch offset built by Champagne in '76 as the Super of the future at Oswego. The rule mandate would follow its design, as it would take nearly another 20 years before a major evolution would find its way into Supermodified racing at Oswego Speedway, and it would come at the hands of New England engineer Clyde Booth. Now living in North Carolina, and with the knowledge and resources at his disposal, Booth introduced the first true Aero Supermodified in 1998. The machine, which debuted in red, later became known as the Silver Bullet, with an independent front-end design and inboard suspension similar to that of a common-day Indy car. Booth managed to clean the air completely around the race car, leaving open ports to the many wings which lay around the vehicle. While independent front suspension was nothing new in Supermodifieds, and others had used inboard suspension, Booth managed to accurately put it all together at once in perfect harmony, coupling with it true front and rear wings that could keep the car glued to the speedway. In a matter of time, it could be seen that another change was in the wind, with Pat Abold and Mike Ordway driving the car from 1998 to 2004. The new age design would sit on the front row for the International Classic 5 times, winning 13 feature events along the way, including the 2003 International Classic. Keep in mind, Booth never ran a full season at Oswego in those years. More often than not, when the 61 showed up, it won, and won big. In 2004, Joe Hawksby Jr. of Oswego built his own version of the Booth Aero Super, known simply as the Hawk. Another rule mandate would come down, eliminating independent front suspension and forcing all Supermodifieds from here on out to be built with a solid front axle. And the very next year, the car went into mass production, and since has taken its drivers to 6 International Classic wins, 7 Oswego track titles, and countless feature victories. The rest, as they say, is history. The Hawk Supermodified, along with the Extreme Chassis Aero Super built by Paul Koloka of Oswego, are now the standard of Supermodified racing at Oswego Speedway. And what a standard it is! From uprights to roadsters, offsets to rear engines, and now aerodynamics, the Supermodified, albeit in a smaller box than it used to be, continues to evolve. And with it, the rich history and legacy of Oswego Speedway continues to grow.
Coming down out of the corner, green flag is down from Jim Burley. Double O Joe takes off out in front.